Top of the morning folks, today from the Reddit Rainforest. I delivered pizzas every week for 2 years to a family. A day after the last delivery I made to them, I came to find out the wife's dead body was 3 feet away from me. Reddit. What are your he seemed so normal stories? Worked at a boys and girls club for about a year. The directors, counselors, hardly interact with admin. But the main admin who was in charge of running the site seemed like a super nice guy and had adopted 2 foster kids, approximate 10 and 12 years old, that actually participated at the club. During our summer training sessions, he was extremely adamant about drawing clear boundaries as far as physical contact with the members, and that anything deemed as inappropriate would result in us being arrested by the authorities. A few months after I quit, I come to find that he had been molesting his foster sons for several years and committed suicide when he found out he was being investigated for embezzling from the non-profit company. My father, being a very racist man, never approved of my best friend when I was a kid. She was black. He would tolerate our hanging out outside but forbade me going anywhere near her house, saying he did not trust her family. My mom, understanding how ridiculous my father could be, would cover for me on a couple of occasions so I could spend the night at her house. She lived with her father, stepmother, and 4 half-siblings. Nights were spent watching TV, eating junk food, and listening to music. Normal adolescent bull malarkey. The father would occasionally give me a weird vibe, but I would attribute that to my dad's influence. Fast forward 6 years. She found me on Facebook, and we ended up exchanging numbers to catch up. During that call she admitted that her father had been raping her since the age of 8 and that it continued until late into her teens. It only stopped because a friend reported him. She admitted to having liked when I spent the night because it was one of the few times he would leave her alone. Malarkey still haunts me. I grew up in a small town. We had one arcade in town and my friends and I would spend every free moment we could there. The guy who owned it was in his early to mid 30s, looked like Billy Corgan, and lived in an apartment above the arcade. He seemed like a cool guy. We'd talk about video games and pen and paper RPGs a lot. One time it was raining pretty hard and he gave me a ride home in his DeLorean. 1.21 gigawatts, which was totally rad. Mike seemed like a pretty cool guy. Years pass and one morning I'm sitting in the high school library reading the morning paper before class. There he is on the front page being arrested for sodomizing young boys in his apartment above the arcade. It totally blew my mind. When I got home from school that day my mom met me at the door. Did he touch you? The man in the DeLorean. Did he make you do things? To sum it up, Billy Corgan lookalike who owned the local arcade molested children. My mom became convinced I was harboring a molesty secret. I was not. While I never actually experienced this, my grandparents have told me a story from when my grandpa used to work on the freeways around Los Angeles. My grandpa was pretty close with some of his work buddies. One man in particular was very friendly, and my grandpa would talk with him almost every day as they worked alongside one another grading and paving the freeways. He even offered to watch my mom, aunt and uncle if my grandparents were busy because he had some exotic animals at his house that the children loved. After a while my grandparents moved away and many years later my grandpa got a call from a detective asking about this man. Apparently this guy murdered young children and had been burying them in the freeways as they were being built. Luckily my grandparents never trusted him with their kids. When I was in elementary school I had this hippie art teacher. She was very fun and nice. Like she had clay jar with a cork top that said fairy dust on it that was full of glitter. She would sprinkle it on our heads on the way out of the classroom. Eventually she left because she had cancer. Years later, I guess she could not take it, so she went to a gas station, covered herself in gas, and lit herself on fire. She actually killed herself there at the gas station around all of those people. One of the teachers at my little sister's elementary school was shot and killed by her husband who turned the gun on himself seconds later. The worst part? They were having a pretty heated argument in their driveway, and about 5 of their neighbors who came out to see what the fuss was all about witnessed the murder/suicide. Everyone thought he was a totally normal guy. I was the manager at a sandwich place that was in a very bad neighborhood, one of the highest crime areas in the country. I was never too concerned, though, because we were directly across the street from a police station. We had one regular customer who came in 2-3 times a week. He did not look anything like 90% of our customers. He was middle-aged, clean-cut, always in a long-sleeve button-up shirt and tie. He said he was a teacher and talked about his students and all the great things he did for them. Honestly, I would have said he was a hero. Then one day, He walked into the restaurant with a gun in his right hand, and he was crying his eyes out. He was babbling a little bit, and just bawling. He walked up to the cashier, who had not had a chance to move away, pointed the gun straight at her, paused, then pointed the gun at himself, and attempted to pull the trigger, but dropped the gun instead. A customer tackled him, and a group of us made sure he stayed on the ground, and the police came and took him away pretty quickly thereafter. We came to later find out that he had discovered his wife had cheated on him with one of his students, and he had killed her about 10 minutes before he came into the restaurant. During my parents' divorce, they remarried when I was 14. My mom married this dude Todd after knowing him for 3 weeks. He was a truck driver with a mustache and a huge beer belly. My sister and I automatically hated him just because he was not dad to us. Fast forward 4 months later, their marriage comes to an end and we move out in a single night. Turns out, while he was watching us while mom was at work, he was actually in their bedroom fapping to kiddie naked people. My sister also confided in me later that she would wake up sometimes and he would be in out closet, watching us sleep. To sum it up, mom marries secret pedophile, gets us the duck out of there. When I was working in downtown San Francisco, there was a guy who played the saxophone in front of my building. I could hear it from the office. Sometimes I'd take my smoke break and go listen for 10 or so minutes. He stopped showing up, and about a week after I noticed, I saw an article with his picture. Had killed his wife 22 years ago and had only finally been tracked down. I tipped the guy my coffee change. Played good sax. My girlfriend's primary school teacher was always gathering money to help children in third world countries. A few years later they suddenly got a substitute teacher. It turned out they found out his entire hard drive was filled with images and videos of him having sex with small African children. Turned out he used the money he gathered from the students to pay for the plane tickets to get there. In elementary school and early middle school there was a man that lived at the very end of my road. My road consisted of 4 other houses. Each of the 4 other ones had children. We all knew the guy pretty well, all 5 of us kids, and we'd go over there periodically and hang out in his basement. His kids were all grown up, so he said he liked the company. He always had those cheap but delicious frozen icy pops. He also rescued abandoned ferrets and fostered them until someone else could take them, and had a good 10 plus of them at a time. We loved going over there, playing with the ferrets, and listening to his stories as we ate popsicles. We found out years later that he had been arrested for child molestation when we hit about 7th grade. By that time we all knew full well what child molestation was, and none of us had ever been touched by him. To this day I have no idea if he was wrongly convicted, if someone on our street was lying about being molested, or if he just managed to keep his cool around us for some reason. To sum it up, I used to hang out with a possible pedophile as a kid and play with his ferrets. I had a substitute teacher in high school that was always really nice and got along with all the kids. He was even cool enough to let us have class on the roof of the school, accessible by a window. It just came out recently that he tried to kill his wife by shoving her off a cliff in Maine. He did it to try and get her money that she had recently inherited. Made me second guess all the time I spent on the roof with him. When I was growing up, my friend Joe's dad was just a random dad. He had a job as the head social worker at this home for troubled teens. Very respectable in our Volvo driving, farmers market going liberal enclave. He was just a normal dad. Then one day years later has on the news for driving his car into a trailer park, luring a 7-year-old girl into it to help him look for his lost puppy, and then raping her. I'm still friends with Joe, but have never mentioned the thing about his father. Kind of awkward. When I was a kid my mom was extremely neurotic about us being abducted by some adult in a windowless white van or something. We lived like 2 blocks away from our elementary school, which was a straight line from our front door basically. You could see it pretty much if you went to the sidewalk. But she was a concerned mother. So, between our home and our school there were a few apartments. A nice old man always stood outside one of the apartments. My mom and him chatted every day. He was always nice to my brother and I, and my mom told us that if we were ever in trouble to run to him. We walked by him every day and he'd nod and smile and say hello to us. One day my mom goes to the corner store, and as you enter they had the newspaper rack on the left side. As my mom comes in to grab a few things for dinner, something catches her eye. My mom did not buy newspapers or even pay much attention to them, but it just happened to snag her eye. She looks down and there he is on the cover. He had raped and molested a bunch of kids like 30, 40 years before up in residential schools. In Canadian. They had finally found him and had arrested him. He was a child molester. My mom until the day she died. I'm convinced never forgave herself for that. She felt like the worst parent ever, even though nothing ever happened to us, nor could she have had any way of knowing. She hated herself for that. She took it really hard. Every day we walked by a child molester and my mom told us to go to him if we were ever in trouble. Kid on my D team in middle school never cut his ducking toenails. Super nice kid. A little awkward. Wound up beating his mom with a baseball bat to death with his sister and then fleeing to New Mexico. Edit. We knew his mom. Not too well. She would always freak out over her kid staying over late to work on stuff. He seldom wore shoes. Then he would walk home at the end of the night because his mom refused to drive him home. Also, his sister wanted to get married and asked her mom. She said no. She started to beat the mother with a bat a couple minutes later, and the little brother started in by pushing her down the stairs. The sister, the boyfriend and the kid fled to New Mexico. If you are reading this, you made it until the end of the video. There is no more after this. Click the thumbs up button since you liked the video because you made it until the end. On screen there should be some more videos similar to this. So either go do something else or watch another video. That's it. I do not know why you are still here. What are you waiting for, a secret message or something? Maybe someday. Who says one does not exist somewhere already? It does not. Or does it?